Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming back from the break on time. I'm Stephen DiMarco, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of Compete, which is part of Kantar Media, one of the sponsors up there on the right-hand corner. And really, it says I'm an SMO on that. I wonder what that means. Super marketing officer, might be senior or super. Anyway, so really happy to have the panel here this morning with Daniel Slotweiner, Natasha Hritzuk, and Jim Dravillas, representing Facebook, Microsoft, and Google, respectively. So we've got 30 minutes, and I really wanted to jump right into it so we can maximize the time and cover as many bases as possible. So we're going to go right down the line, and we'll each take our turn answering the question, kind of describe for the audience your role and maybe one priority that you're working really hard on over the next 3 to 6 months.
Sure, thanks a lot. These chairs are great. I feel like they should come with a martini.
I can make that happen for you.
Could you? Yes. Thanks a lot for hosting. This is great to be here. I head up the Measurement Solutions Group at Facebook. Our primary responsibility is to really bring to bear the resources that Facebook has on behalf of our partners. And that comes down to using a variety of data sources we have access to, including polls and discussion data and profile and interest data to help them answer a variety of questions, everything from ad effectiveness to insights and consumer research. I'd say the sort of primary, if I had to pick one thing that we're really focused on doing, it's at the moment using those tools to really impress on advertisers that are sort of entering the digital space or already there in a big way, the need to focus on brand metrics as the sort of outcome measure for their activities. We still see a lot of people focused on traditional digital metrics, which are not always correlated with things like purchase intent and increasing awareness of a brand and brand perception. So really helping tell that story, giving people the tools to understand their campaigns in that context is something we're very focused on.
Great. And how long have you been at Facebook?
About 1.5 years.
Great.
Which for there is a fair amount of time.
Okay, Natasha.
So I'm Natasha Hritzuk, and I'm the Director of Global Insights and Analytics for Microsoft Advertising. And I'm actually very new to the role. I've been at Microsoft for 7 months, and I'm kind of a neophyte. I'm new to this business. I actually cut my teeth at General Mills, so I come from the consumer packaged goods side of the world. And I was heading up category insights and consumer insights at General Mills UK for 5 years, and then came back to New York and started in at Microsoft. I mean, the trajectory of my team's been interesting. We actually didn't have an intact consumer insights team at, or I should say insights and analytics team at Microsoft. And we basically formed as a team in January. We had people who were in pockets doing insights and in pockets doing analytics, focused primarily on the US. And I've married everybody up together. And we're one team, and we are kind of hitting the ground running. I would say that, and I've also at the same time been learning about media and learning about the world of technology. So it's been an interesting 6-7 months. I guess the one thing that I've realized is absolutely critical, which is I guess why we're all sitting here today, is measurement. And that's really been probably the key challenge and focus since day one. I mean, there's other areas, obviously, that we're throwing our attention in, but the whole notion of measurement has been a big one. So right off the bat, I was sort of tasked with, we've got to have a global campaign effectiveness tool. So I kind of threw my heart and soul into that, and we're getting there. I think we've got something that's, that we're actually beta testing with clients. And I guess with all large companies, the glory lasts about 30 seconds because they said, great, now we need a solution for multi-platform. And I'm thinking, oh Lord, okay. And at Microsoft multi-platform is Admira, which is our TV solution. So we buy excess inventory from the networks. And then we have this pretty granular targeting capabilities attached to Admira. So it's basically, for all intents and purposes, a TV advertising product. Then we've got Xbox, which is our gaming product. Then we've got our digital offerings. Then we've got the mobile phone. And so we're just about to kick off our financial year. So one of my FY12 commitments is to look at building a multi-platform measurement tool. And you know, it's an interesting challenge. I think we're going to talk about GRPs in a little bit, and as I start to look at all the different solutions available, GRPs are starting to kind of rise up as the one way of linking all these platforms together, and also, you know, the way that we can do it in a way that matters to clients. So I might be turning to my colleagues here for some tutorials on, you know, on and to, you know, get a bit of a brain trust going on how to attack this big issue, because I think, you know, we're focused on digital, we're focused on mobile, TV, we've sort of been there, done that, we've got that sorted, and I think the next, the sort of wave of the future is linking all of these up, all of these up together. So maybe next year we'll be able to sit here and talk about our multi-platform measurement solution.
Right. That sounds like you've got a lot on your plate. Great. Jim. Yeah, and I'm Jim Dravillas. I'm a senior researcher at Google. I find it interesting, actually, that this particular panel, each of us are relatively, I think, new to our positions, a year and a half, 7 months, and about a year and a half for me as well. And much like Natasha, where Microsoft has a lot of different platforms and a lot of things going on, I mean, Google has a lot of irons in the fire. And to pick kind of one particular priority that we're focused on is kind of difficult. When I think about the research that we do, I bucket it into 3 rough classifications, and probably similar classifications to what other people here are doing as well. You know, there's ad effectiveness, looking at brand impacts. In our case, you know, we're interested right now in discovering more about how search can influence brands and the brand impacts that come from search as well, in addition to looking at things like offline sales and other types of ad effectiveness measures there. Other things that we're interested in as well, in fact, are actually influencing the way that media is measured with the industry and kind of affecting industry measurement by kind of improving on existing methodologies and making sure that we use kind of gold standard, best-in-class techniques whenever we execute our research. And then the final bucket of research that we're working on is the audience insights and looking at how people consume media, how do new devices, new technologies influence, change the way that they're consuming media, what's the role of media, in particular digital media, within the purchase process as well is pretty important. And in that regard, I'll share a notable insight in terms of things that we're finding. Last year, we conducted over 60 studies at various kind of vertical and sub-vertical levels of how the digital media are influencing the purchase process and how they get used in the purchase process. And what we uncovered there is something that we call the zero moment of truth. And if the first moment of truth in traditional shopper research is you kind of go to the store, you're encountering the brand in the store kind of face to face, that's the point where you're making a decision, and that's considered the first moment of truth. Well, that's the first moment of truth. Then everything before that is the zero moment of truth. And that zero moment of truth, that space that leads up to you encountering the brand physically in the store is actually becoming more and more important as new media, new technologies develop. All these different information sources out there for you to look at consumer reviews of products, for you to make searches on particular brands, to actually visit the manufacturer's websites. All of this information plays into the process, and what we're finding is that people are actually making decisions about what brands they want before they get to the store. They're making decisions about which stores they want to go to based on the inventory that they're finding online, and when they actually show up in the store, they know more about that product than perhaps the person who's selling them. And that's a pretty big change relative to just a few years ago, and it has some implications for marketers and what they should be doing and how they should be investing in digital media and thinking about their shelf space in the online kind of information world, and how they should be evaluating their digital advertising and digital efforts and its success towards sales. I probably would have called that pre-truth or the moment of zero truth, but that probably wouldn't have worked as good as the zero moment of truth. The zero moment of truth. We actually call it ZMOT. We shorten it. Yeah, sounds very P&G. The shorter, maybe it sticks in the vernacular. We don't know. Cool, great. So, like it sounds very P&G to me. That first moment of truth sounds like something that P&G would create. So we're gonna build on that and use that as our transition to kind of the next chapter of the panel. I'm gonna play the role of a global CPG CMO. So I'm going to do a little role playing here, which is sometimes dangerous. But we're gonna go with it and see how it turns out, and we're gonna go down the line with some questions. The first question is one that Natasha referenced earlier. It's the GRP question, and here's how it goes. So I'm a CMO talking to you, and you can respond back in the role of yourself. So I made the mistake of asking an online media planner how many GRPs my integrated global campaign was going to achieve, which had caused, among other things, a 60-minute debate on the value of a GRP metric for online. As a CMO who is not all that ensconced in the world of research, how do I navigate this confusion? Please make it make sense for me.
I'll go first. First of all, I think it's the right question to ask. And we should acknowledge that sort of as digital publishers in particular, we've not done a great job at providing CMOs like yourself, SMOs in this case, with the tools they need to understand the trade-offs they make across channels. And as that's getting more fragmented and harder, it's even more important to do. So you know, for a long time, the GRP has been the standard metric for understanding who you reach and with what frequency in the traditional media world. And it's sort of incumbent on us to expand that. One reason in particular is that, you know, CMOs understand the relationship of GRPs to sales in a way that they don't understand a lot of the other digital metrics that we've been providing in the past and their relationship to sales. So establishing that metric that they're used to, connecting it to that understanding of a certain number of GRPs is going to have a certain reaction down the road is critically important. So at Facebook, we're incredibly supportive of this idea, and we've been working for over a year on this initiative that Nielsen's leading. We're one of the partners in that initiative, and we feel very strongly that this is the way the industry should be moving, exactly for these reasons. It's a great sort of sound methodology that Nielsen's going to, I think, spend some time on at this conference discussing. And at Facebook, we plan to, once it's released, actually fund reports from that product for large campaigns on Facebook. So the idea is that, you know, we really think it's going to be something that's very valuable to advertisers to help them piece together this exact question of who they're reaching and with what frequency across all their channels. So very important from our perspective.
So we'll reduce the complexity for marketers.
Hopefully, yes.
As a former CPG marketer.
Well, I mean, I think this GRP piece is really critical. And I mean, when I think back to what I did at General Mills, we ran on a quarterly basis marketing mix models, which basically defined how we were going to plan our media and helped us allocate our media spend. So historically, digital's not been at the table. Digital hasn't been part of that conversation. And so we're kind of sitting there kind of trying to break through when the decisions are being effectively made without us really being a participant. And GRP becomes the baseline currency for us to join that conversation. So I think, you know, for us, sorry, I just slammed my hand into the microphone. For us, the real benefit is finally getting a seat at the table. And you know, I think we know intuitively that digital works very synergistically with traditional media. Now we have the opportunity to basically prove it through econometric modeling. I think, secondly, from a client perspective, it means that digital is going to be accountable, and I think that's also really, really important. You know, I think. You know, not that there hasn't been accountability historically. I mean, all of us are working very, very hard at, you know, running campaign effectiveness studies on a monthly, weekly basis. But I think if we can speak the language of TV, we can, you know, we can enjoy the same level of accountability that TV does. I actually think what's going to happen is we're going to have to, as an industry, agree on how we manage that accountability, because I think that's going to flag up some interesting issues for us. But I think the real key piece is being able to have a seat at the table, understand how we can work synergistically with traditional media, and to really demonstrate the ROI of digital. Because at the end of the day, we cared primarily about sales uplift. I mean, you could argue that, you know, campaigns should also be, you know, have strategic content that drives brand growth over time. But when you're having to make snap decisions, at the end of the day, it's always going to come down to sales uplift. And I think the GRP piece is really going to be sort of the critical defining unit of measurement that's going to enable us to do that. And then if I loop in the whole multi-platform measurement, complexity. I mean, if we can convert, we're in the process of converting Xbox to GRPs, and we're beta testing that. Admira, we can already convert, obviously the TV piece is already, and we've already converted that to GRPs. Digital, we're in the process of doing that. Mobile, that's a work in progress. Once we can get all of us speaking the same language, then it basically becomes a modeling exercise. So for me, this would be a huge, very positive development for the industry. So I would be, if the CMO poses a question like this, I laud them for, tackling head-on one of the critical points of discussion in our industry.
Great, thank you. Jim.
Yeah, I mean, I think the larger question that this kind of rolls up to is about allocating dollars within a media mix. And I do think that the GRP is an important tool here where you can kind of enable a conversation and enable people to kind of talk fluently about one medium versus another. It certainly is the metric that's used within planning tools. It's metrics that are placed within econometric models as well. Just the one thing that we would definitely advocate, though, is that this particular metric of GRPs be augmented with some element of impact associated with it. That the GRP and these coverage, reach, and frequency metrics aren't the end game in and of themselves. And to that end, Google is involved in an industry initiative with the ARF as well, with Wharton, Stanford, Group M. I think we have advisors from each of the 6 holding companies that are working on this as well, and Nielsen conducting some research, and that project, I think it's called Project Impact, or AFI, which you'll probably hear a little bit more about tomorrow when some of my colleagues are speaking. But that's really aimed at looking at what is the impact of various ad formats on a normative basis that can be imported into these planning tools and affect kind of the upfront decisions that are based on GRPs. So what's the expected outcome from a 30-second television GRP? What is the expected outcome from a 15-second pre-roll, from banner advertisements, from print advertisements, et cetera, to look now not just at how can I maximize coverage at an efficient rate, but how can I maximize my effective coverage at an efficient rate. So we're in the process right now with that project of conducting the pilot research. I think there's like 20 plus studies going on right now, and expect that by the end of the summer, at least the first initial results should be coming out.
So I'm intrigued by that. How about some examples of impact? What are the outcomes that you're looking to measure?
Right, and I think we would want to eventually get to, with this industry initiative, get to metrics that go all the way down the marketing funnel. It's easier to tackle those at the top of the funnel, and that's where we're starting with things like ad awareness and recall and breakthrough. But ultimately, you want to get all the way down through that to things like consideration and to sales. But that's a longer term proposition, and probably a second or potentially third phase of this type of research.
And will definitely vary by industry and perhaps by company.
Right, and what we're really aiming for are normative measures, benchmarks that feed the ingoing planning process. You're going to have to measure your own campaigns at the end. You're not going to get the average for every campaign, but at least helps to inform those decisions in a way that we think is more comprehensive than it's currently being done.
And definitely leads down the road to what we think is probably all think is true, that it's understanding what combination of ad formats and planning or flighting looks like to achieve certain objectives. So, some better understanding of if you're going to launch a product in July, what's the way that you tie digital and TV together, for instance. When do you start? Does one go first? Does one go second? All those kinds of questions. We don't have great answers to today, and sort of a GRP and some standard ways of measuring effectiveness by format is the first step towards getting there.
I mean, it is kind of the holy grail, isn't it? Because GRP, for all intents and purposes, is making sure you get the right people. Then you want to make sure that you've got a message that resonates. So that's basically about the core brand effectiveness measures. And then you've got the offline sales piece, and actually, are you driving the right response? So, I mean, that really is kind of the trinity. You're trying to get the right people, make sure that the message that you're conveying resonates, and that you're going to be driving a behavior at the end of it. So I agree that if you're just focused on GRPs, you are missing some other key pieces of the puzzle.
I'm glad we all agree, and I actually think your point is a good one, and I've spoken about this before, and David Poltrak has kind of pointed out the exact same thing to me, and yeah, absolutely, you're right. It's not just about kind of one format versus another kind of independent metrics. It's how they kind of work together, and ultimately the research would look at those interactions as well too.
So what was the Trinity? That sounds like that's like a tweetable comment for anybody out there. The Trinity is the right reach, the right message format, and the right store experience. Is that a good way to summarize it?
Yeah, I mean, arguably, yeah.
Okay.
I can
You could probably do better.
No.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
So, all right, so you got me over the hurdle. I'm feeling good about this concept of GRPs and taking what I know in TV and thinking about digital. Now I'm ready to make the move. I'm marketing frozen pizzas, right? One of the sexiest products around. I know I have to get to teens. I've got a great amount of data, a great amount of confidence in how my TV campaigns drives sales of frozen pizzas in the store. But I think I got to go beyond it. I've been reading a lot of ad age articles, doing a lot of research with the ARF. It seems like teens are using digital media and mobile phones a lot. How do can I just take my TV campaign and move it over there? Is that the right way to think about it? Moving my TV into digital? Natasha.
Well, and actually, I think this follows on very nicely from what you were talking about, Jim. This is a question I get a lot, and I think it's really, first of all, I think it's a huge psychological shift to think about advertising, moving your advertising from TV to digital, not even moving it, taking a portion of your TV spend and moving it to digital. Then you have to start worrying about the creative that you're playing across these different platforms. I mean, this question came up so much that we actually conducted a study which isn't exactly along the lines of what you're talking about, Jim, but it's probably a fairly, a bit more of a simplified version of it. We basically ran a 30-second TV spot on TV alone, then tested it on digital, then looked at the synergies between TV and digital. And what we found was that the 30-second campaign actually, in terms of brand metrics, performed better on digital. But when you ran it on both digital and TV, we had the best effects yet. And when the study came back, I sort of thought, okay, that was intuitive, that makes sense, but it felt like a bit of an oversimplification for me. And I guess it comes back to my experience at General Mills where, I mean, if I were to think about where I allocated the bulk of my time, 80% of it was on the creative. Really, really focusing in on the right message that resonated, pulling out the right emotional benefits, making sure they were linked up to the right product benefits. So we were focused a ton on the creative piece, and we actually saw the platforms that we served the ads on, so TV, print, outdoor, digital, as almost being agnostic. It was all about the creative, and then you just sort of threw it out there and everything else was an aperture. Then I come to Microsoft and the focus is all on the platforms. And actually it suddenly struck me, wow, after we did the study, we shouldn't neglect the creative either, because the creative is critical. I mean, it's probably of equal, if not, I won't say greater importance than the platform, but of equal importance. So we just launched a study. I'd love to go into detail, but it's actually launching at Cannes a week today. And it's looking at how to really optimize creative across the different screens. And I think what's really interesting is that each of the screens, so if you look at mobile, if you look at Xbox, digital, TV, each screen, first of all, consumers have had a different legacy and relationship with each of these screens. Teenagers are an interesting one because they're coming to all of these screens at roughly, TV has a bit of a legacy, but all the other screens they're adopting much quicker than my generation. But each screen has very unique properties, unique characteristics, and it taps into very different consumer mindsets. So in my mind, actually, you've got to have the right screen, certainly, or the right set of screens, but you have to have the right creative that taps into the unique properties or characteristics of each screen, which means that you're actually speaking to consumers through the screen with a message that's appropriate to that screen, or a creative execution that's appropriate to that screen. And then I think you'll probably elicit the strongest response. So yes, by all means, you can take your 30-second spot and stream it on the mobile, stream it on the Xbox, stream it on your, on your digital platforms. But I think the real art lies in having creative that is consistent. You want the same, you don't want different campaigns, you want a consistent campaign, but that you're really optimizing the opportunities that each screen presents from a creative perspective.
Definitely. There's, yeah, I'd like to say there's a influence that each one of them has, but then there's also an interplay that you have to understand and
Definitely.
engineer into your thinking. Anything from Daniel or Jim on that?
I mean, I would just add that, we know there's sort of standard approaches when you think about TV for allocating a certain amount of budget to creative development and things like that. I think we definitely do need to think about that for digital, and there needs to be an explicit part of the creative development process. I think this is exactly what Natasha was saying, that's specific to the medium, because we do see huge impact of different creative and their ability to drive the campaign objectives. So I would say no, don't just move your TV ad over to digital.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, of course, each medium is going to operate differently, and there's different ways you would kind of execute your creative on television than you would online. I mean, a pretty obvious one, at least on YouTube, our dominant form of video advertising is 15 seconds compared to a 30 seconds. So straight off, you have something to do, and you need to understand kind of how to make people engaged and react within that 15 seconds. And I think another thing you would want to do, rather than just kind of throw your plan online, is look at the different strengths and weaknesses of each of the media, and how do they actually work. How do they work together? So we've been doing research looking at how YouTube and television kind of work together to create a balanced plan, where YouTube can add people that are not touched by your television campaign, but even more importantly, it can add effective exposures to those that are hardest to reach from a television campaign. So when we put the both together, you end up with this nice balance of a larger number of people who are getting to an effective frequency level, and we're finding that it's important to actually reach those lighter television viewers, that they index highly on some very desirable qualities. I mean, they tend to be higher income, they tend to be more educated, they tend to be more likely to be young families with high consuming potential, they're technologically savvy. So you add that component to what your known quantity already is from your television, and you get a really nice combined effect.
And do you tell that story, anyone, you tell that story to the planners and the buyers, I'm sure, but do you tell it to the creatives as well? Because ultimately, those are the folks who are going to come up with the ideas that ties it all together.
Well, and I think sometimes they get, I think sometimes they're the guys that get...
You were shut off, by the way.
I'm shut off. So I've been waving my hand around so much that I've now shut myself down. I think, in a funny way, we've been so focused on the planners because basically they're the guys that are, the middlemen between, the people selling advertising and the clients, that we've been really focused on those guys to make sure that digital has a place at the table. But I actually think the creatives are an equally important audience because it is about, getting the right platform, making sure that you're reaching the right people on the right platform, but it's also about making sure that those people are hearing a message that resonates on that platform. So I think the creatives have maybe been a little bit overlooked, but I think all of us, moving forward are becoming much more focused on getting the content right.
I think we're really trying to engage the creative community because, one of the things we've learned from our research is how important the social interactions are and their relationship to the media that we run. So helping creative agencies understand the need to sort of generate that social interaction, engagement, the stories that are generated from there that can then be used as part of a broader campaign is really critical. So for us, they're becoming very tied together, the creative and the planning process.
Great. So we've got 90 seconds left. And I think the golden question for a CPG CMO is, I feel really good about my TV. I'm feeling a little better about my digital, but people don't buy frozen pizzas online yet. They do buy a lot of Domino's, ironically, and Papa John's, et cetera, online, but they don't buy the frozen pizza online. So how do you make me feel good? How do you make me feel great about the connection between my online investment and offline purchase? We'll start this way and work it back.
Sure. I mean, I've also heard the question asked where people say, well, people don't buy toothbrushes online, and then I would just point them to Orabrush, which is a company that advertises on YouTube. 25 million views of these Orabrush commercials on YouTube, sold millions of dollars worth of these Orabrushes, which are basically tongue scrapers that cure your bad breath associated with your tongue. So people actually do buy these types of products online. In terms of how a lot of advertisers kind of evaluate the effects of their spend, particularly CPG advertisers, we know that media mix models are an important component of this. But I would contend that these media mix models haven't quite adapted fully yet to some of the digital realities. And search is a really good example here. That search is a pretty rare medium in that if you spend in your other marketing vehicles, you can create inventory in search. So if you have a really good television campaign, a really good print campaign, really good display advertising campaign, online video campaign, you can generate demand, more people searching about your product. That actually creates inventory. So search is both an input, you have this paid search campaign, and it's also an output. And if you're not accounting for that in your models, these indirect effects, then you're actually missing out on the success of the campaign. And if you're not adapting to that, that's a problem. So we've conducted with market share partners dozens of these types of studies where we've run these econometric models. And what we've found, not surprisingly, is that people are suboptimally spent online. That on average, they're 6 times underspent on search. They're 2.5 times underspent on display when you do this. So I think Google would like to start kind of educating more of the modeling community about how search and how digital advertising works so that these things can be more properly accounted for within the mixed models. And then on the back end of that, after the mixed models are run, we certainly advocate some A/B experiments to kind of test and confirm the outputs.
I mean, I agree. I think marketing mix modeling to date, I mean, look, at the end of the day, it's a model. So, we sort of take these models and they become the gospel. And, it is still a modeled view of reality. There's tons of variables that you can't account for with the models, but they still are driving the way our clients allocate their media spend, because they're the one sort of core way of looking at how all the media interacts. You can control for the different types of media. You can fold in things like the weather, the economy, every variable you can think of, and you can isolate each media. But I think the important piece is you can look at the synergies between the different media. I've been talking to some of my colleagues on the research agency side, and they're getting much better at looking at ways of measuring things that have historically been out of the mix. So, I mean, digital is one piece. I agree they can probably, there's a way to go with search. They're starting to look at ways of integrating PR and social media into marketing mix modeling. I mean, that's kind of the nirvana. If they could get a way of measuring all of these things accurately and plugging into a marketing mix model, then they're all in one place. But I think we're not there yet. It might happen at some point in the near to midterm. I mean, one of the ways that we've been focused on demonstrating offline sales impact in the interim has been partnering with companies like Nielsen and Comscore that have strong offline sales panels, and basically, we're able to show a direct line between showing the digital ad, running the campaign, and then showing the immediate offline sales impact. So, I mean, we found ways around it. I think marketing mix modeling is great, and it would be great if we could get there. But in the interim, there are, a ton of different ways that we can demonstrate that there's a strong offline sales impact with digital. And I agree. The interesting thing that we keep finding too is that digital is definitely, compared to what digital delivers in an offline sales context, the spend is, we found roughly about 1/6 of what it could be. Or should be, arguably.
When you say Comscore and Nielsen, what you actually mean to say is compete in Kantar Media, correct?
Yes.
We also have an offline purchase panel, don't you worry.
Hey, well look, let's chat.
Perfect.
I would just add, I mean, these guys covered the modeling and single source, most of the single source issues. But I would say that one thing we're focused on is also looking at interim measures, because you can't always do a full ROI study. You can't always think about the MMM results when you're in the planning process. But what you can focus on is more on the immediate impact on awareness and purchase funnel metrics like that. So measuring those clearly is something that we spend a lot of time doing, and if you believe those are predictive of sales, we could probably make you feel very good about digital, particularly display ad ability to move those metrics. But we're also doing a lot of work to actually just reestablish the connection of those metrics to offline sales. I think that's really important to show that those are still predictors, still things that you might want to optimize your campaigns on day to day, because at the end of the day, you can actually measure against those, and you can actually do creative testing to optimize for that. So that's a build, and I think it's a sort of part of the mix of the modeling and single source as well.
So I'm going to lobby next year that we come back and present again and talk about how much progress we've made on each of these things. So it's been fantastic. We're over time. I've got one last question. It's not a fair question because you don't live in Boston or Vancouver. But who are you rooting for tonight, the Canucks or the Bruins?
I was just about to say, didn't Dallas win?
Yes. First goal is accomplished. Yes.
I'm going to have to go with the Canucks.
Okay.
Yay.
Great.
I'm Canadian, so I know,
All right.
you know how much I know about sports. But
All
I
right,
have to go
Jim.
with the
I think
Canucks.
I actually am a huge hockey fan, but I think we're all going to let you down because I'm definitely rooting for the Canucks.
Wow.
Yay.
Sorry about that. I'm a Mets fan. I can't root for Boston. So.
Well, thank you all very much. I appreciate it. Thank you for the time. Go Bruins.